Hey guys, welcome back to G.I.Joe on the Tabletop. My name is Brad, Old Man Warren from the Cast Dice Podcast Network, and today we have another special guest. I should say the same special guest from last time, the one and only Dr. Merkury, and we are going to talk about not underwater operations this time. This week it's going to get cold and icy. We are going to talk about ice vipers and snow serpents. Stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome back again. We are with the one and only Dr. Merkury. What's up, Doc?
Hey, what's happening?
Man, it was so good having you on to talk about the Cobra naval troops, talking about the eels and lampreys, that we have to have you back to talk about some of the other 1985 troop builders, the Cobra snow serpents, and of course, if we go further down that trail, and now the years escaping me when we got the ice vipers as well. Two troop types for Arctic combat that you have made in your armies.
Yeah, I think ice vipers, I want to say that might have been early 90s. I'm not exactly sure either. Maybe definitely late 80s at the very earliest. Yeah.
Agreed. Absolutely. They kind of on the cusp of when I stopped collecting the toys. So I think I had some action figures from that era, but I think I'd stopped collecting the vehicles. So I never actually got the wolf until recently, where I got it in resin, but I still haven't assembled and painted mine. Not like yours, which we're going to talk about in just a sec. Now, of course, let's start with the first Cobra snow troop that we saw, the snow viper. Sorry, the snow serpent. I almost said snow viper. Goodness. Snow serpent, Cobra polar assault. Now, file name classified, should be various. Primary military specialty, Arctic operations. Secondary specialty, infantry. Birthplace, various countries. Unsurprising in a troop builder where guys are coming from all over. And snow serpents are the Arctic specialist branch of the eels. Now, we talked about the eels in the last video. They are the elite Cobra frogmen. They are almost like the Navy SEALs of Cobra. And here we have these guys you need to pass SEAL training to even qualify to apply to become a snow serpent. They must undergo the same rigorous training program as the eels, with the addition of a 6-month cold weather course somewhere above the Arctic Circle. Other aspects of their training include airborne operations under Arctic conditions, anti-tank procedures, and the use of snowshoes, skis, and kayaks. If eels are the elite of Cobra's naval branch, then snow serpents are the best of the best. How else could you characterize an individual who would parachute onto an ice floe in sub-zero temperatures and then be prepared to march 50 miles with a full pack, assault rifle, and anti-tank weapon? These guys are awesome. Doug, while I catch my breath there, what are some of the characteristics of a snow serpent that you think are absolutely necessary to have on the tabletop, or have on a miniature on the tabletop and have them be recognizable as the snow serpent?
Yeah, the action figures I remember were absolutely awesome. You know, they had a lot of different pieces. They had a lot of details to them. You had the fur sleeves, the fur shoulders, the fur at the bottom of the jumpsuit that they wore. They had a parachute pack, large backpack, an anti-tank rocket that's set up on a bipod.
Right.
The AK-47, the helmet, the goggles. They had a very distinctive look. They didn't look like anything else that was out in the toy line.
They were so cool. And
the snowshoes.
Yeah, right. But not only was this one, and I thought the original Storm Shadow had the best selection of toys with the action figure, and then this guy came out.
Yeah.
And it was a regular unit builder. It was, you could just have an entire army of these guys. And in fact, the guy who I grew up playing, a guy named Jason, who I played toy soldiers with all the time, I think had 3. And I was so jealous because he could actually have, like Arctic battles. Yeah, it was great. And I had 1. So between us, when we played, we could have, Arctic operations.
Right.
And Snow Job.
I only had 1 too. Yeah.
Yeah. But Snow Job and my snowmobile, the polar bear, were some of my favorite toys as a kid. I think the The polar bear was my second collection vehicle for G.I. Joe. And so for me, I always had very fond memories of that because, as a little kid, it was, oh my God, there's more of these. And it was my first. And so I played the hell out of that toy, and then of course that's well before we got Snow Serpents. But that started my love of playing G.I. Joe in cold weather. Plus, growing up in Boston, I kind of used to it. Right.
Yeah. Seems like a natural environment.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about how you made yours. So I have a work in progress photo here where you have sculpted on the webbing for their jumpsuit because the jump harness, the Snow Serpent could have been a very boring action figure, been all white or gray. But instead they added that webbing. And I'm going to back it up here. So we have the blue webbing of their parachute pack that went on top of their sort of light gray camouflage. And that really did, for me, define a large part of that figure. And you've sculpted that on using a crooked dice model. Is that right?
Yeah. So the model that I started with a base figure was, I really wanted one to have the AK-47s, but I could not find any figures that I could build off of that kind of still had that snowsuit look to them that these guys had. So what I ended up using was a crooked dice minion in the boiler suits. And the boiler suits give you a pretty good, like, rough approximation of like a snowsuit. It looks very close, I thought, to what the Snow Serpents had. So from there, I used green stuff to both make like the thigh pockets as well as the parachute and webbing. And for me, like, I am not a miniature sculptor, and although I went to art school, I'm not a sculptor by any means. So it was a learning process the whole way through. And if you are ever intimidated by trying it, I recommend everyone to at least get some of the blue and yellow tape at some point in their lives if they're interested in this hobby, just to play around, make trash bags, make whatever you can, and just get used to it. Because there's a lot you can do with it. And the webbing wasn't too bad once I got, rhythm down and, started to know what I'm doing. And with these being metal models, if you're ever fearful of making a mistake, just use your X-Acto knife and cut it off, Yeah,
exactly.
Yep. There's nothing to be afraid of.
The thing for me, especially when sculpting a model of this, with this many little pieces, is to think about what goes on the bottom. What's the first thing? Lay down that. And then for me, I like to give it 24 hours to dry because the number of times I've gone to, and I am like you, I think you're actually much better at sculpting than you're saying. But for me, I'm very basic. And so I like to build things up. And so I start with that bottom level, let it dry, then do the next part on top. So in the case of like the Ice Viper, I'd put his webbing down, then I would put the pouch along his stomach, for example. Then once that's dried, I would, on day 3, I would start putting the fur. And I'd highly recommend, I think fur is it's one of those things that you need to trial and error, how you tug the back of your hobby blade along or use a sculpting tool. But yeah, it's one of those things that once you get it, it is actually surprisingly simple. For me, I had a couple of bases where I put some green stuff down and I tried different sculpting techniques until finally I figured one out. I'm sure there's plenty on YouTube these days, but when I did it more than a decade ago, it was just trial and error. But I think I'm actually pretty good with fur, but it's one of those things that once you get it, it's great. And if, as you say, if you don't like it, scrape it off.
Right.
And then start again.
Don't have any fear about it. And my biggest problem that I have is that like you were saying, to take your time and wait. I have to tell myself to slow down on stuff sometimes. And as I'm working, especially with green stuff, or if I'm working in sculpting, that's where you really need to just you get to a point and then just give it some time to breathe, come back to it in another few hours or maybe the next day. And then add some more to it when your head's clear and you're not feeling like you're rushing through something.
Yeah. Once that bottom layer's solid and hard, you can sculpt on top. And then if you screw that up, you can just, again, scrape that off and have that bottom layer be hard enough that it's totally intact.
Yeah, it's extremely forgiving.
Yeah. And make sure you use plenty of water, guys. On your blade, so your blade doesn't stick to what you're sculpting. You want it sticking to the model, not to you. But the number of models that have my fingerprints permanently stuck into them. Anyway.
Right.
Yeah, let's talk about how you're going to finish that model, because you designed 3D printable helmets and accessories to go with this model. In fact, here is a sprue of your helmets that I had printed up in resin. So, and here's a closer picture of them there that have the built-in goggles and the face masks. And is that just because they are so characteristic that you couldn't or so iconic a helmet that you couldn't necessarily find in analog?
Right. Well, I think too, like, yeah, it was so iconic that you couldn't find it in analog. I took a look through, and it was another thing where, amongst friends, we looked at different places that we could source from, and there just wasn't anything that was coming up with that look. Right. And we live in a golden age that should never be forgotten with this hobby. And if you're looking at building units of troops and you do not have access to head sprues from other companies, well, that's where like applications which are absolutely free online, like Tinkercad or Sculptress or others that are out there, you can make up those 3D models to be able to have printed, and you can have them printed in bulk. So rather than trying to sculpt 15 snow serpent helmets, each exactly the same, or try to recast them, with I have neither the time, the patience, nor it doesn't work. No. So with Tinkercad, I actually sculpted up the helmets with Sculptress, which is another free application. That's an application where it allows you to make more organic shapes, is what I would say. Nice. And with that, I used that to make the backpacks, the pouches, and anything that was basically not like a Euclidean style piece. It was something that didn't have rough edges and that needed to have like folds or wrinkles or whatnot. So, and
yep. And I'm holding up a sprue that has the backpack for a snow serpent, has the helmet of the snow serpent, has the pouch to go on the chest. I know you sculpted some of yours, but you also 3D printed some as well, and the rocket launcher. So you can actually print a sprue of these, the sprue, and then repeatedly print and then have an entire squad's worth, which is what I'm going to have, several squads of snow serpents. But, again, print in resin, you're ready to go. These are just ready to clip and stick to a model, and you have everything you need.
Right. And with resin, it's very affordable. For those sprues, which are available for free on Thingiverse, I put them up there to share with everybody. You can convert your whichever 28 millimeter miniature you want to use. You don't have to use the crooked dice ones, but that's what I used. So that's what my stuff is scaled towards. But you can use whatever models you like. And, the average sprue, to print the cost, you have to remember with like 3D printing, most of the expense of the print is in the initial setup. So although it may cost X amount to make one thing, it doesn't cost much more to make 10 of that same thing.
Right.
So those sprues become very affordable to print. And if you have your own printer at home, I mean, it's even easier. If you know the settings and stuff and you're savvy with the device, it's very easy to make,
Totally. And and resin is such a nice material to work with if you need to carve in a little bit of a helmet to get it to sit in a torso. So with mine, I use the US paratrooper bodies from Warlord Games. They're plastics.
Nice.
Because they have a nice big jacket feel. It's the same model I use for my Winter Joes. Same sort of thing. And I haven't put the fur around their neck yet. I'm doing that last. So I'm going to sit the helmet and then put the fur around it. But same difference. You're going to get the same result. Well, let's look at your actual painted snow serpents. And here we have the actual finished product. And they look like snow serpents. They are so good. They look exactly like the toys.
Thanks. Yeah, the only thing that got to me was, like I said, the rifles. I would have been much happier with Warsaw Pack rifles, some AKs or something. But, for what it is, you can't be too choosy. And, there's a lot of options out there for, the age that we live in that you would not have had just even 5 years ago, let alone, 10 years ago or more. So
Right.
I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. It was some work doing the green stuff for the fur and for the straps and stuff, but having the helmets and the backpacks 3D printed definitely took a lot of the burden of the work out. It was way easy.
Agreed. Now, I see you've also made some Arctic hisses to go with these, and you painted a Sergeant model for your Snow Serpent using the Pistol Trooper, but then you painted his gear red instead of blue, which really makes him pop on the tabletop. So, man, and again, that ties beautifully to the Arctic hiss that they run alongside.
Yeah, the Arctic hisses are the same running press hisses that you ran a video of before. And I did was I used the turret from Jabberwock that's up on Thingiverse. I had it scaled down to, I'm going off my head, so I want to say 36% or something. I can't remember exactly.
I think on your blog you said 37.
37. Okay, I have it up somewhere for prosperity, but yeah, I scaled down the turrets. I had those printed. When we talk about resin, not only there's many different types of resin that you can have printed. So as I've gone and done 3D printing in different projects, one of the things I've also done is I've experimented with different materials. So the turrets that I had printed, I knew that those rockets were going to be fine and delicate. Right. And some of the resin can be very brittle. So I tried using a material that's also available through a lot of resin printers called resin durable. What resin durable is, and you want to get a guy that, again, this goes back to being able to source to the vendor of your needs. Find the vendor that works well for you. Give him a couple test things before you give him something big. But the resin that's durable, how that prints, that material that prints out is actually like a kind of rubbery resin. I want to say it's about the same consistency as like a HeroClix figure, if that helps the listeners. Yeah. So what it means is it's durable. You can paint it, you can sand it, you can trim it, you can do all those things to it. But if you accidentally bumped it with your elbow, it's not going to break in half.
Right. Nice. And so you have a couple of Arctic hisses to support your troops, but that isn't the only thing you added to your Snow Serpents for support. You said, I need a machine gun. Now, that's something that we didn't see in canon, and yet looks perfect and awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, when I saw, when you read the file card for the Snow Serpents, and they're used as these, behind the scene, parachute behind enemy lines kind of troops, I thought it would be a perfect setup to have, a heavy machine gun team. And having used the Crooked Dice miniatures, the minions in the boiler suits, they have a heavy machine gun team troop set that you can buy. So I thought, why not, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, perfect. Well, right on. Let's move on then and talk about another Cobra Arctic specialist. If the Snow Serpents were the elite infantry, let's talk about a group that is on top of them, the Ice Viper. Now, Ice Vipers, and we'll get into their file card in a second, were visually kind of different from the Snow Serpent in a number of ways. In a way, their look harkens back to regular Cobra troopers far more than the Snow Serpent. What were some of the characteristics visually that you would say would be necessary to have an Ice Viper?
When I see the Ice Vipers, I didn't actually have the action figure as a kid. That was one of the later toys that came out, so I did not have that toy. But I do remember my younger cousin had it. And I thought it was cool because it had the, the ridiculous ski rockets that you saw also on the Snowcat, but this was for Cobra.
The wolf. Right.
Yeah.
Yay.
So this, they had the fur, they had the snowsuit again. They had basically a standard Viper head, but they had goggles on top of the Viper head, which was different for that time.
Yeah. Now, if you go to Reptilian Overlords, they do a pack of Cobra heads that are supposed to match Warhammer scale. But I find that those models match up very nicely for Warlord scale. And I was able to find, if you buy a sprue of their heads, you not only get 10 Cobra heads or whatever they call those types of heads.
Yeah.
But you get a bonus Cobra Commander head for every 10, which is cool.
Oh, wow.
But
Yeah, that's
two
cool.
of those 10 have the goggles on the forehead, which are perfect because the toy, of course, had that. Let's look at the file card here. The Ice Viper, which is the Cobra Wolf Driver. Ice Vipers are the mechanized branch of the Snow Serpents, both of which must first qualify as Cobra Eels. Again, a nod back to the Cobra Frogmen from the last video. They must take additional training of the Techno Vipers, and they must be prepared to serve and repair their own vehicles in the hostile Arctic environments. Ice Vipers are fed a special high-fat diet to help them retain body heat and have their faces... and I still am not sure what this word is, depilated to prevent frost from their breath icing up their beards. And then the quote that goes with them: when it's 40 below zero on the tundra and everyone else is buttoning up tight in their shelter because an ice storm is blowing in from the north, that's when you need to worry about the Ice Viper sneaking up on you. Out there in the big whiteness, there isn't a place to hide. Whoever bundles up first because he figures it's too cold to fight loses. And now let's take a look at your Ice Vipers because they look fantastic. And they have the AK-47 you were just talking about.
Yeah, so these are actually Empress. Empress Miniatures makes a line of what they call Universal Moderns. And the Universal Moderns are basically bodies that have generic... Warsaw Pack weapons, and they come with a separate head sprue. So their suits that they're wearing, I thought looked close enough to snowsuits that I could just do a little bit of extra work to. And that's all I did was I basically swapped out a head, and the head is a Cobra head that a friend had. A small. He had like a small commission run done of Cobra heads. And I had one of those heads, and then I sculpted with green stuff the snow goggles on top of it.
That's right. And again, Reptilian Overlords makes those, so those are only new compared to when Jason and I got our Cobra heads forever ago.
Right.
And those you don't even have to sculpt; they're ready to go. And of course, you put, and in this photo, it's kind of hard to tell, but you put the fur around their collar as well. And of course, they're standing next to the Cobra Wolf, of which you also have two. And yours are made out of the PLA that we discussed before, and they have those, as you put, awesome as snow torpedoes that the Snowcat had.
Awesomely ridiculous. Yeah,
exactly.
Yep.
But yeah, they look fantastic. Now you have run a series of Arctic games using your Cobra forces, because I mean clearly you have at least 2 Ice Hisses, you have 2 Cobra Wolves, you have the Snow Viper, the Snow Serpents and the Ice Vipers, and you have a Destro and a Baroness and a Dr. Mindbender, who, if you look back through the video, is hiding in the background of one of these, all rugged up for cold weather gear. You've got a full Arctic army going on.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah, and I made Casualty models too for the Snow Serpents.
Nice. Now,
and that was scenario specific. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how did you make those Casualty?
So the Casualty models, thanks again to like Thingiverse. I had the head sprues, and I had all the pieces that I made for the backpacks and the heads, and I had those already made. So what I found was I did a Google search on Thingiverse, and I looked for Casualty models, and they had World War II German Casualty models. And basically I shrank those down to 28 millimeter scale, beheaded them, put on Snow Serpent heads instead. And I did that all in Tinkercad, mounted them on like a base in Tinkercad. And then a friend of mine who works for a company where they do 3D printing basically of like car parts. And so what his company does is they print in nylon, which is very different from other materials. Right. So with nylon, how it prints is it prints using kinetic sand. So it doesn't make any supports. So it's kind of it's a dangerous thing. It's good that I don't work there, because I would probably be fired. But
yeah.
so, but every
What do
now
you mean?
and then,
I wouldn't have that same problem.
right. But every now and then, I ask him if he can print some stuff, and those models were just perfect, quick, easy things that he can print in the basically in the negative spaces of other pieces for work. So
brilliant. Oh,
yeah.
that is awesome.
Nylon's a neat material too. It's very different from like PLA. It's very different from resin. It's got a little bit of a tooth to it, so it's slightly rough. But if you look at like pictures of my Mauler or some of the other vehicles, some of those vehicles are printed in that nylon. And the advantage to it is that it can print very small models very well because there's no supports that need to be removed. So
yeah, they look good too. Your Mauler looks spectacular.
Yep.
Right on. Well, that's I think that brings us to the end. Now, if you want to see pictures of some of the Doc's great gameplay videos using all of these models, sorry, not videos, pictures, you can go to Dr. Merkury's lab. That is spelled Merkury. And if you go to that blog, you can see pictures of all of his G.I. Joe stuff. And my God, is there a lot there. But if you search up snow, you search up Arctic, you can find all sorts of great stuff. Snow Serpent, Ice Viper. If you just type in the name of the vehicle, usually you'll find what you're looking for. Plus there's Transformers, plus there's He-Man. I mean, you name it, it's all there. It's amazing. So, guys, if you have not checked out Dr. Merkury's blog, do it now. It's great. Doc, thank you so much again for coming on. It is a pleasure, as always, to talk Joe with you, and we'll have to do this again soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Guys, if you have enjoyed this video and you want to hear more from Dr. Merkury, specifically maybe see some of the specific things we've talked about or something that you've seen on his blog and you want to see us unpack how he made it or just talk about some of the cool stuff and how you play it, please message below. We'd love to hear from you. We are still figuring out our sea legs on this channel about what you, the viewer, wants to see from G.I. Joe on the tabletop. But it is, it's just a blast to talk to the Doc and to bring this content to you. No matter where you are in these crazy times, though, we do wish that you are safe and well. And until next time, this is Joe on the tabletop saying goodbye.